Welcome to The Learning Curve,
a podcast about insights, inspiration and innovation in higher education. My name is Van de Poel.
And my name is Sharon Klinkenberg. We are lecturers communication science at the University of Amsterdam.
And we work for the Teaching and Learning Center of the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Hey, Sharon.
Good morning, Van.
Good morning. First recording in 2025.
Yes, we've got a new year in front of us.
Yes, exactly.
I'm looking forward to continuing this with you.
Me too. I really like our chats about education and didactics and hopefully inspiring our listeners.
Yes.
So today we're talking about the usefulness of open educational resources, which means I will learn from you today, definitely.
I hope, probably.
Yes, and hopefully later today I will go and find some useful resources that I can use in my teaching. But for our listeners and also for me, what is it, open educational resources?
Yeah, so the open educational resources is the idea that you make your resources for education available in the public domain. Mm-hmm. So instead of just having the material that you use for your course just in your course or just in your personal OneDrive, you make it available for the rest of the world so someone else can use your materials. So this is a pretty noble idea, right? So open up the education system, make sure that you provide everything that you created for your course for the rest of the world.
Yes.
So this is the idea of the open educational resources.
Somewhat comparable to open access in science.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Exactly. So I would say that you could see it as I've created something and I make it available. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a step above that where you also, the thing that you made are actually in the public domain and you can also modify it in the public domain. Mm-hmm. So that's an even higher step. But the first one is already a big thing exactly. Because I feel that not a lot of teachers are actually using open educational resources.
Yeah, and you can use it by sharing your own resources, and you can use it by finding resources.
Indeed.
So what do you want to focus on today?
I think let's first talk about the finding of the resources, mm-hmm. And the obstacles that you might have as a teacher in using this.
Yes.
So one of the resources in the Netherlands that I want to mention at least is the EOResources.nl, mm-hmm. Which is a national repository for open educational resource material for higher education.
Yes.
There's a lot on it. Universities are connected to this, so if your university is part of this program, then they can sign up to also let teachers add materials.
Yes. So your university or applied university, they can add materials.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not everyone is included, I think, but at least everybody can search for things. Mm-hmm. So you took a look at it?
I took a look at it. First of all, I have to say, of course, it's for the Dutch universities, but it has English resources as well.
As well, yes.
Yes. So, for example, I already found a book that's both available in English and Dutch, exactly the same, open resource about quantitative methods and statistics. It's used at Utrecht University. And I'm already intrigued because I would like to see if it's useful for my own course, where we are now using different books for the English and the Dutch track.
Yes. And if you look at this, how would you go about this? Just describe it to me.
Yeah, well, when I'm looking at it, it's, for example, find learning materials. So you can search on material, the type of material that you would like to see. Would you like a textbook or audio or video presentation? What's the discipline? At what level and in which language? But then you start off blank. So I think I would go back to the drawing table and first look at what is it that I need? Yeah. Do I really need something? Yeah. And if it's something that I need, can I find it here before I start developing my own materials?
Mm-hmm. I'm interested in what would be your process of assessing if the thing that is provided here is good for you. You would download it, look at the materials and...
Yeah, and that's actually the thing that already scared me because I saw now that book and it means like I have to read it cover to cover. Basically, it's online, but to see if it fits with my course. And that kind of scares me already. And I think many of my colleagues, because where do you find the time?
Exactly, yeah. And also if you I haven't seen this book, but if you click on it, what do you get actually?
In this case, you get a GitHub page.
Okay.
With all sorts. So for people who don't know what a GitHub page is, Sharon?
It's an online repository hosted by GitHub where you can not just store your material, but also collaborate on this material to work on it. So this is already pretty advanced. So most of the materials that are provided in these repositories are a PDF. So if someone would provide you a PDF, then for me that would be a little bit of an issue, because if you look at the table of content, I would sometimes think, well, this is applicable to me, but that isn't.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in our earlier podcast, right? About the Lego approach to course design. This also holds for open educational resources. If you just provide the Playmobil, so it's packaged, you can't change it, then it's less useful, because there are always some things in there that you don't use in your course.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, like if I already scroll through the contents of this online book, I can see that some parts might be really useful, but others are not, because it's more related to a different domain. And I wouldn't use it. So can I actually tweak it and get parts out of it that I can use for my course? But the nice thing is that if that works, then I could collect information online from EOResources and then fit it together and kind of have
the building blocks to create your own content.
So I have kind of bespoke content for my own course.
Yeah. So when it's in GitHub, it's like, oh, this is the ultimate, right? But it already requires quite some technical knowledge to work in there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's a middle ground, right? So instead of providing a PDF, just provide a Word document, maybe per chapter or per topic. So it's easier for you to find and use the things that interest you or that you need for your lectures. Because then you could put together the things that are relevant to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is, of course, about textual information. But what I also like is that you can find, in terms of blended learning, also lots of audio and video materials here, which is really nice, because of course there's a lot to do about blended learning, and who hasn't recorded a micro lecture or knowledge clip yet. But what people often don't know is that it's totally okay to find these materials online before you start developing it yourself. And that could be YouTube, but that even better if you find it here when you know that other universities have used it as well. In that sense, kind of validate that it's okay to use this.
Yes. Would you be willing to use the knowledge clips of other universities?
Well, I'm actually using a lot of knowledge clips which are recorded at this university, but for a different program, but they fit with what I want to teach, and not everything. But in that sense, I am a little bit technical and I could cut something out. Or I just tell my students, okay, what they explain here is a little bit different. And of course, it scares students. But on the other hand, I mean, we live in a complex world.
That's
true. It can't all be perfect.
Yeah. It again comes back to the thing we discussed in an earlier podcast, where if you create these knowledge clips, then maybe not integrate the branding of your university, make it a little bit more generic in that sense. And there are quite some resources out there that are quite useful. I think we even have our TLC Method and Statistics Kaltura page.
Yes,
public.
Exactly.
So we'll link that in the description.
Yeah, where you can find lots of...
We have about 400 videos on method and statistics, lectures. And I think the Delft University also has quite a collection that is very interesting. And I recently worked on the ShareStats, where we have sharestats.nl, where we have over 5,000 statistics assessment items. Yeah,
so that's another thing. EOResources can be assessment as well,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. We've published this on GitHub, and you can find our website and just scroll through all the items that we have. We've tagged them, so you can just say, I want English items, and I want items that are about interpreting the outputs on this specific test, and then you get a sub list of items that that are relevant, and then you can just download it and upload it to your own assessment system. So I use it in this way because when I make an exam, I usually look at the previous items that I've used to pick a few, then I create some new, and then I look in the repository to see if there are still some items left that I can reuse. And it's in the public domain, so that means that all students can also find it. But there are about 5,000 in there, so
there's no way that you can practice all
exactly.
of that. But I'm also wondering a little bit about a kind of a feeling that I have, and I know many teachers will have this as well, is the time investment. And what can you say about how much this has been used already, these EOResources?
I have a feeling that teachers are not using it that much. I think there are the lucky few that are embracing this, that are using this mostly. But still, first try to find it.
Yes. Where do we start?
Have you ever heard of EOResources before I just mentioned it to you?
No.
No, exactly.
Which is bad because I work for the TLC, but no, I haven't heard of it. Yeah.
So the Dutch NPulse program also has a new marketing campaign, Go Open. You might have seen it, might not. But it's creating the awareness, but I do think that a lot of marketing needs to be picked up to point teachers in the right direction of where to find these sources. So that's one thing. So if you don't know that it's out there, and you don't know what terms to use to search for it on Google, well, it's not going to get found. So you have to be actively pointed in the right direction.
Yes.
And then, of course, you have to find something that fits your needs. And that's quite a challenge, right? Because your needs are very specific.
Exactly. Well, that's maybe something we should talk about in a different podcast episode. Should it be this specific? Are we maybe too perfectionist in what exactly we want in our course? And shouldn't it be a little bit more open and broader than what we're assessing, for example, or what we're teaching? But at the same time, it does take time. And I think for many teachers and just in general for people, when there's something that you can use, but you don't know exactly how to use it, it feels like the Mount Everest, and you're just not going to do it, and you're going to spend more time creating your own content.
Yeah.
Because that feels easier at that moment than trying to learn about how to use those resources, which is a time investment, but then it pays off.
Yeah. I would also see it as that creating educational material for teachers is also a learning process.
Also, yeah.
So I've made a lot of teaching materials, and every time that I'm creating this, I'm learning and I'm understanding the materials better in this process. So also the process is relevant for me to go through to really get a grasp on the materials. And if I go to some difficult topic that I want to cover, and I get an open educational slide which is full of formulas that I don't understand because I haven't written them down myself, and I have to dive into it, and it takes more time, and I'm like, oh, it's daunting. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same as getting the lecture slides from the previous teacher of a course that you're taking over, and you have no clue what the story behind it was. Yeah. And then sometimes it's easier to just start over again with your own story. So that might be a bit the same feeling.
So say that it would be beneficial to not just provide, well, here's my PowerPoint, but also this is the story behind my PowerPoint. So that you at least have a little bit of a notion of what the overall structure is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
But more awareness, I guess, is the first step. Our listeners are now aware of at least EOResources.nl and Sharestat.nl, where you can find Dutch and English educational resources. So that is amazing. We'll put it in the show notes. And the second step, and maybe we can talk about that some other time, is how to actually start using it. And I think one important lesson here is to start small.
Absolutely. And then try to pick apart what is useful for you.
Yeah.
But maybe also in another episode, we could also think about your contribution as a teacher to the public domain. Because for me, this is also always something that I structurally do. It's part of my process. Even if I write a new lecture, I create it in the public domain, and you can find it in my GitHub repository. So that's just part of the way I create content. But that's a mindset. And
exactly.
How can you first initiate such a mindset, but also how do you execute on that? Because what do you need to know? Exactly. Well, that's for another time.
That's for another time.
Shall we leave it at this for now?
Let's leave it at this. I'm going to dive into EOResources.nl because I want to know what I can find there.
Awesome. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Learning Curve.
Produced by the Teaching and Learning Center of the Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Amsterdam.
Our music was provided by Peter van Dijk.
For more information, find us wherever you get your podcasts.